Welcome to the Scottish Rite Journal podcast, an audio presentation of the Scottish Rite Journal, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. This week's article is Hope and the Journeys to be Traveled by Brother Michael E. Howard, 33rd degree, and comes from the November-December 2023 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. I have allowed myself to drift away from active involvement in lodge activities over these last 10 years or so, aided and abetted by family illness, personal injuries, and more recently, the devastating COVID pandemic. I was raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason on July 14, 1998, in Bremerton Lodge No. 117, Free and Accepted Masons, Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Washington, although I now hold membership in William H. Upton Lodge No. 206, Free and Accepted Masons, also in Washington State. After this, I immediately embarked upon a course of travel that initially took me to adjacent lodges in neighboring towns and then to more distant towns, cities, and states. I explored the panoply of Scottish Rite degrees through the 32nd and embarked on the pilgrimage through the Mark Master, Royal and Select Master, Knights Templar, and York Rite College degrees. Over the next 2 decades, I traveled, less than some, but more than many, visiting lodges in Canada, England, Germany, Hong Kong, Iceland, Ireland, and Mexico. This article aims to present some of the memorable moments of these trips that often afforded me the opportunity to visit Masonic lodges. I remember a lodge in San Francisco that boasted 2 sets of lodge officers' jewels in massive 18-karat gold. One set donated by brothers who had struck it rich along the Russian and American rivers during successive gold rushes, and the other donated in the mid-1900s by 2 brothers whose usual vocations included dentistry. This lodge hosted catered weekly meals, feasts really, for wives, widows, and members, complete with liveried waiters, linen tablecloths, steam tables, gleaming silver cloches, sterling flatware, and porcelain place settings. The lodge in question sponsored all expenses paid monthly mystery tours by train, bus, or boat, advising wives and widows how long to pack for and whether or not swimwear or down jackets would be de rigueur. I frequently attended the historic Lugar zur Einigkeit in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. The members wore formal evening wear, were served refreshments before and after lodge by live-in caretakers, and hosted lectures presented by candidates on topics ranging from Masonic jurisprudence to Copernicus and his De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium. Copernicus who, in On the Revolutions of Heavenly Spheres, wrote words that might be interpreted Masonically. For in the middle of everything is the sun. For in this most beautiful temple, who would place this lamp in another or better position? 2 brothers sitting at my table during the De Revolutionibus lecture recently had returned from East Africa, where they had been engaged in preserving vocabularies and grammars from near extinct indigenous languages, some of which had fewer than 20 living members. The master of the lodge was a highly placed executive in an internationally known publishing house. I sat in a Prince Hall lodge whose ritual had survived the vicissitudes of the Morgan affair unscathed and had remained virtually intact since the Revolutionary War. Members took smoke breaks outside of the lodge building between degree conferrals, tucking up the corners of their aprons to prevent potential eavesdroppers' unauthorized glimpses of their regalia. I conversed Masonically in a Mexican lodge that was so politically partisan that the Tyler sword was supplemented with a Colt python. I had no problems finding the Masonic lodge in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I just followed the cast iron street lamps supported by lively gilded cherubs clad in Masonic aprons and wielding the various working tools. I visited a lodge in Texas that, unaided by the Grand Lodge or outside donations, and unaffiliated with the better-known Shriners Hospital, had built its own children's hospital that provided free health care to virtually all comers. Throughout my travels, both esoteric and geographic, I have sat in lodges that were decidedly dry, and lodges that were decidedly not dry. I have sat in lodges whose business was almost exclusively paying utility bills, settling Grand Lodge assessments, reading funeral scrolls, whereas I have sat in lodges whose business was so esoteric, transcendental, and speculative as to seem more meditative than traditionally Masonic in character. After almost a decade of distance, this last year I gradually have returned to the fold, partly as a result of my travels. I have attended accessible fellowship dinners, stated meetings, and quite recently a first-degree conferral. The lodge had borrowed a conferral team from another lodge, but still only had enough officers to fill essential chairs. I was the only brother sitting on the sidelines, and, rusty as I am, I was asked to pro tem as Tyler. Thankfully, not a very taxing office during degree conferrals. I was allowed to tile from the inner door as the degree progressed and was able to enjoy a nearly flawless first degree. Last year, while interviewing some senior local government officials for an article I was writing, one of my interview subjects noticed and commented upon my Masonic ring and forget-me-not lapel pin. This, in addition to travel, was actually the impetus for my relatively recent return to lodge. I took the opportunity to discuss the rich history and once all-pervading presence of Masonry and the economic and social fabric of their jurisdiction. The person in question asked me how he could become a Mason, and I told him that no one would ever attempt to recruit him, but to be one, he had to ask one. He told me that he was asking, and I said he would be contacted within the next week. I referred his request to the appropriate district deputy, and, in due course, he was investigated, voted upon, and accepted for the degrees. As I re-embark upon my Masonic travels, I find travel itinerary shrinking and that final undiscovered country looming on the horizon. Yet, like legendary Masonic writer Albert Pike, I place hope at the end of the journey to be traveled. 28th degree, Night of the Sun lecture, Morals and Dogma. My chance encounters while pursuing my usual vocations may have added a Brother Mason to a historic lodge, but chance encounters will not preserve our fraternity for future generations. On the other hand, if Masons willingly comport themselves when engaged in the outer world so as to attract the interest of at least one serious candidate, they will have at least placed their collective thumbs upon the scales measuring arrivals versus departures. This, too, is the role of those who travel. Like and share this article, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you wish to comment, please leave one, and as a reminder, hit the notifications bell. Any accompanying photographs or citations for this article can be found in the corresponding print edition. The Scottish Rite Journal is published by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. Mark Dreisenstock, 33rd degree, Managing Editor. I'm your host, Matt Bowers.